shoe, or you watch them look at the specimen shoes later, they'll be looking at them like this to look at flat and level. They'll be looking and turning them, doing things different ways. So when I look at flat on a horse's foot, especially if I'm judging one or I'm being judged or something, I'm not gonna say I do it every day shoeing. I get down here and I hold this foot just like I'm holding that horseshoe. And I turn it always. Look at all angles. I do just like that. I come over here, I do just like I'm looking at flat or level on a horseshoe. Does that make sense? I mean, you got to get down here. You got to look. I ain't looking at level as far as balance on my leg, you know, because, you know, I am purposely manipulating it where I want it, because I'm just looking at flat. I'm looking for high spots in my trim. Does that make sense? Okay. Another thing, right here, you know, I'm having trouble with a little spot right here, and it's probably because my rasp's sitting on this sole and it's going like that. So the very last thing I'm going to do, get a little bit of this out, look at it again. Okay, now I'm looking here, you know, I'm looking at my wall. You can see I've got more here than here. And if you look at the junction of the lamina and the sole where they come together, or the interface, you know, you look at that distance, because you know, if you look at, I want feet symmetrical. I believe in trying to make them symmetrical. And if I can't get them symmetrical, I believe in putting on a symmetrical shoe and boxing the shoe off if I have, you know, somewhere. Because usually, for me, in order to get the foot in the center of the leg, you got to put a symmetrical shoe on. Usually if you have a horse that has a real, you know, angles out from his fetlock, his pastern angles out, he'll be straight on the inside and flare to the outside. Well, you can look at it, and in order to get that foot in the center of his leg, you've got to put some shoe to the inside. Does that make sense? You know? Or if he's pigeon-toed or whatever, but I believe in putting symmetrical shoes on horses. I believe in making a foot that's easy to fit, which is a symmetrical one. Does that make sense? Trying to keep the proportions even. You know, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's, I had Mark Caldwell, these guys probably heard him say that before. He went to school there. He always said, if it don't look right, it ain't right. If it doesn't look right, it's not right. So, you know, for me, if it don't look symmetrical, I ain't saying you can always get it the first time, but I believe in trying to make them symmetrical. So, I'm looking at, you guys, if you can see it from there, you can probably see there's more wall from what I'm calling the junction of the sole, is where the sole and the white line come together. I use that as a guideline on trying to get symmetry, because that usually doesn't change. From there out, the lamina can stretch or the wall can be thicker. But as far as what I'm talking about, I get even thickness from the interface, or the junction of the sole and the lamina, out, from here out. The same. Does that make sense? Yeah, well, I'm trying to get from that junction to the outside of the same all the way around. Does that make sense?
That's your guide for the wall then?
Yeah.
Where to rest the wall?
Yeah. Now sometimes, you know, you can take, now this, I would, you know, I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes right here. This is not going to look real good on this foot because you don't have a lot of foot. But if you have a horse that does have a lot of foot, you know, to find that true interface, you can get a loop knife or something like that and come in here, because then you can get in there and you can see where that, as you can see there, this toe, how stretched that is now, that lamina.
Just for clarification, Mark, you want equal thickness from the inside of the white line to the outside of the hoof wall, rather than from the outside of the white line to the outside of the foot.
Right.
Okay.
Because the outside, because the white line can stretch, you know.
Okay.
So,
You start at the inside of the white line.
yeah, where
and
it and the
then
sole comes together and then measure. So that way, see, like, you know, a lot of horses that have been, you know, had a lot of leverage on their toe or whatever and have a lot of separation, or say in a quarter or something, by the time I'm done, you know, I may, you know, because I'm probably going to be nailing into that separation, you know. And it's okay, you know, you can do that. Now, I ain't gonna overly thin the wall. I may bevel it a little bit, but I'm still trying to get that measurement the same so I can get that leverage off and get that foot more in a proportion, more symmetrical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do believe too that if you shoe any big horses, you know, Shires or Clydesdales or even some warm bloods and things, you know, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, I've always thought that, well, not always thought, but I thought that that interface was, you know, from their end didn't change. But I do think the sole, I think it all can stretch some, because I've shod draft horses and nailed this far inside the white line and the sole didn't hurt them at all, you know, that were flared really bad, you know. I don't always do what Duckett says. You know, he liked to trim the heels to the widest point of the frog. I like to trim the heels to the highest, widest point of the frog, like so you can see a rasp across here, so you can see where the highest, widest point of the frog is on this foot. This would be what touched the ground first. So I went across my rasp so you can see. So I like my heels to come about to there, and then I like to fit my shoe to the widest point of the frog, because I think for me, I think sometimes to the widest point of the frog on some horses, especially horses like this, is lowering them too much. That's just my opinion. All I'm doing here is on the bottom, where I did do a little shaping, I do it kind of on the edge with my rasp this way. And I make a line so that when I take it forward, that gives me something to dress to, okay? Now, if this had been a horse with a lot of flare, before I ever trimmed anything off the bottom, I would have shaped my foot, I would have trimmed the frog, and maybe I'll do it on that one because he's got more foot on him. I'd trim my frog, see where my widest point of my frog is and everything, where my frog's at. I'd shape my foot first. If that horse ain't gonna have a lot of flare, but if I did have one that had a lot of flare, they brought me bones. They brought me bones. And I would flare dress my foot before I ever touched the bottom. Take it forward, you know, use those lines, dress my foot, then take it back under the horse and trim it. That way you still have something dead to nail to. If you trim the bottom, then flare dress it, you don't leave yourself anything dead to nail to. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. Okay. The center of articulation would be right through the center of the coffin joint, where the coffin joint articulates, right here. And on most horses, you know, this is a pretty small foot. Most horses, I'd say from, I don't know, probably from a 10.5 to 12-inch foot, something like that. If you go through the center of articulation, right where this joint, where the center is, and go straight down. On most horses, that's where the center of articulation will be. You know, about 1.8 inches from the tip of the frog. Okay, so that's just a good landmark when you don't have to take an x-ray to see where it's at. So from there to break over and from there to the end of my heel of my shoe, I'm gonna try to make the same distance. That's my goal. I don't always get it. Now, on a horse like this, I'm gonna fit this horse probably with, if it's all right with you, I'll probably fit him with a fair amount of, I'm gonna fit him to the widest point of the frog if that's all right. So I'm gonna have a little bit of shoe and I'll box it off. Now, if it was a speed event horse, like a roping horse or a barrel racing horse or cutting horse or something, and you can't get by with having that much shoe out there, you're gonna have to you're gonna fit him tighter in the heel. So you're gonna have to do something to get those proportions the same. So that means you're gonna have to roll the toe or rocker the toe or something. Cheat the breakover, move it back because your distance from here to here is gonna shorten up. Does that make sense? And the whole idea is this, what I said a while ago, is with the fulcrum, using the center of articulation, as the pivot point, as the fulcrum, is keeping that the same. Because once this gets too long, the fulcrum doesn't have the leverage that it needs. Once this gets too short, the horse loses propulsion, he loses power. Does that make sense? So it's just a balance thing. Now, I ain't gonna say that I always get it. I may not get it on this one, but that's my goal, okay?
How do you determine that on a live horse?
Just that right there. About an inch and an eighth. Yeah, but sometimes you get a horse that somebody's got the bars on. You don't have no reference.
How do you find it relates to the widest part of the foot?
Say it should be the same place.
Like,
And that's something that I've thought a long time about, or thought for a long time, that people get to talking about so much about breakover and the heels and they forget about the widest point of the foot. If you keep the widest point of the foot where it should be, you'll have the heels trimmed where they're supposed to be. You know what I'm saying?
The
Because
relationship between that and bone doesn't change. Doesn't seem to change.
well, no, unless you put on a natural balance shoe
Well,
for a long enough time,
for a long
then it
enough
changes. Then it changes.
A what?
A square toe shoe for a long enough period of time will change, remodels all that.
time. Right. Then you make the toe the widest part of the foot.
Yeah, you make it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It ain't supposed to be.
yeah. And I ain't saying there's, they got a place, There's a place for it. There's a place for everything. Except for Texas Longhorns, there's not a place for them.
Is that because of lateral flare mostly? Or?
Well, no, I think that he said when he trimmed him, he tried to leave a little bit of foot on him, and I think he just left a little more on this one than he did the other one. Not much, just a little. You can just see that he's just a little deeper in his foot here than the other one is.
So you drop it to this point, and then you put your steel to that point.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be able to, on a performance horse, I say performance, a horse doing a high speed event, he may not always be able to fit. His heel should be back here. You can see there's a little, I don't know if he's had a injury, hit himself or something. So I'm not even going to try to get that flat because I'm going to end up just lowering it.
In cases like that, would you just leave that alone? Would you try to bring it down? Would you
No.
float that? Or
No, because if I keep bringing this down to try to get this
You'll be
back,
lower.
it's going to lower that heel even more. So I'm just going to,
just let it come down?
I'm going to leave it alone, and I'm still going to try to hit the widest point of the frog, and I'll just box it really good. That'd be my goal.
Just wait for it to grow out.
Yeah, because you can see it's coming down. There's a little crease right here in his foot, but above it the wall's coming out normal. Okay, I was going to talk about measuring. I use a tape measure, soft tape. Everybody does things different. That's just what I do. That's what I've always done. Unless I do different on a draft horse. That's the only thing I do different on. I use a ruler on a draft horse. But I measure circumference, and I'll measure from where I want the shoe to fit around to where I want the end of the heel to stop, all the way around to where I want the heel to stop, to fit to. Now, say this was a smaller footed horse, and I was going to put some a plain stamp 5/16 by 3/4 shoe on him. For me, I'd measure, okay, I'll just tell you this first. It doesn't matter if you use 1/4 by 3/4, 5/16, 3/4, 3/8, 3/4, 1/2 by 3/4, and you're going to plane stamp it. It doesn't matter. The measurement won't change unless you start changing the width of steel. Then it changes. Okay. So the thickness doesn't affect, unless you're going. I mean, it will affect it if you're going to draw it. But I mean, if you're just going to turn it and punch it, it doesn't change. So okay. So what I'm going to do for me, when I measure this foot, and if I was going to put a 5/16, 3/4, 3/8, 3/4 on, just 3/4 width shoe, plain stamp, I'll measure from fit to fit, take twice the width of the steel. So 3/4 times 2 is 1.5 inches, and drop that from my measurement. If I'm using 7/8, I measure fit to fit, double the width of steel, which is 1 3/4 inches, drop that from my measurement. If it's 1 inch, I'm building a sliding plate for the horse or something, using 1/4 by 1, I measure fit to fit, times the width times 2, 2 inches, drop that from my measurement. That's on a plain stamp shoe.
Fits exactly where you want that shoe to stop.
Yeah, that's for me. Now, some people forge different, you know, some people do things different, but that's for me, and that's just maybe a place to start. If I'm gonna put a fullered shoe on, you know, I'm gonna measure fit to fit, and for me, I gain a 1/2 inch in length in hemming and fullering. So I'm gonna drop, so I'm gonna measure that foot, say it was 12 inches, I'm gonna drop 2 inches from it. Okay, does that make sense? And, huh? Yeah.
This is all ready to bump the toe and all.
Yeah, now if I'm gonna bump the toe, if I'm gonna say I'm gonna bump a 1/4 inch in the toe, then I gotta add that to my measurement. You know, I mean, or, you know, I say add it to it. I gotta not measure, subtract 2. I gotta subtract 1 3/4 inches because I'm gonna lose a 1/4 inch in my bump. Does that make sense?
Yes.
13.5. 13.5 on that. Yes.
Now, according to the difference, the way that you forge one, those measurements might change.
They're gonna change a bunch. Craig, when we was on team, Craig cut shit a lot less than everybody else because he likes to whip on it. Yeah, I like to leave my shoes a little chunky. That way, if I come a little bit small, I can get it out of there.